What's going on, beautiful Jellyfish? It's Tracy, and today I'm going to be doing a tip video talking about correcting common magic errors. I'll explain a little bit more once I give examples on like what I pretty much mean by that, but this is, I would say, for more on the competitive side of things. But I mean, I guess you could use these too for like things like EDH and like more casual stuff, but I was thinking in my head like a competitive mindset. So I have like 5 kind of examples and like way I would like solve those. So the first kind of like example I would say is that like assuming that you can beat any deck, even bad matchups, because the person you're playing against is a new player or is a young player or is a female or whatever thing you want to say, pretty much saying like, oh, I can totally beat that person because they're whatever. So I made this little note and actually I really like it, so I want to read it word for word for you. I said, don't get cocky because it may cost you the game. There have been instances where I have had in my subconscious, I would say, like, oh man, like this person's a new player, I probably have this in the bag. And I don't mean to say that, like I've said that and it like in my head, but like I don't mean that to be like a rude thing. I just think it like, I'm like, oh, haha, okay, cool. But then on the opposite end, I've had instances where I've known I'm playing a really good player and I'm like, I'm gonna be defeated, there's no way I can win. So I feel like when I've had those sort of thoughts, especially like if I'm playing against a new player or something, I've always done it and it's never been like, at least for me, it's never been like I'm trying to be like mean about it. It's always just been like, I don't even know, like a confidence thing. I'm not really too sure if I'm making sense, but what I would say is to really just like get out of that mindset and really just kind of like face whatever opponent that you have. Even if you are playing against a player like who is really good, I think like having this sort of mindset, oh my god, I'm like never gonna beat them, like just is like super negative energy, and I would just try to like not be involved in anything like that. Like I would just try to be like as positive as you possibly can. But if you are playing against like a new player or something like that, or someone's like who's young, like just take it as like any other matchup and just like do your best to like focus, because again, it literally can cost you the game if you're like, there's like no way I could lose. Like don't get into that mentality. It's really negative. The second thing is really important, and I think we're all guilty of this, is blaming your losses on the deck / matchup rather than the skill level and you as a player. Now, that is not to say that like you can straight up be in a matchup where you have really tight plays and you still lose because it's just a really tough matchup for you. However, I think it's really important to recognize and own up to the times where you know that you don't play your best. So, story, I'm playing this game, which I think I've talked about a couple of times, called Paladins. It's pretty similar to Overwatch. You like pick like a champion, basically it's like a community, and it's on Steam. It's free, it's really fun. If you want to play, we can play together. There's actually a subscriber that I play with sometimes, which is really cool. Anyways, so when I play it, I feel like I get really mad and I'm very vocal like to Paul all the time. I'm just like, oh my god, like my team sucks, like I get really mad. And I'm just like, a lot of times though, I really try to evaluate, like, is it me as a player? Am I playing really poorly? Or is it the fact that, like, I just don't have a really great team and, like, they're not doing their jobs or whatever, like, they're new player, like, whatever the situation is. So I think it's really important to, like, own up to the times where, like, you just say, hey, I didn't play okay. And that's okay to say, like, especially if you're playing like in a competitive scene, like in a GP or something like that, and you get to like, you know, round 9 and you're like exhausted and you're like, I was not playing well. And I think like that's something we need to normalize way more. It's okay if you don't play amazingly at every matchup. It's okay. Point number 3 I kind of touched on a little bit, but it's that thinking a matchup is so much in your favor that there is nothing that can stop you from losing. This goes back to my first point, like being so cocky you think you can't lose. Really, really dangerous mindset and really dangerous mentality. So I think there's a lot of matchups, and I feel like particularly in Modern right now that I'm filming this, I feel like a lot of matchups, like people are like, oh, that matchup is like so good for you or whatever, and it's like, a lot of times, like, the games can be a lot closer than people give things credit for. I think the reason that we do that is so that we can have, like, a clear set, like, definitive answer. Yes, the matchup is good, or no, the matchup isn't. But, like, in the reality, like, a lot of times, it's not, like, 100% to 0. Like, that's not how matchups look like. So I think it's really important to know that as a player, that not everything is like black and white like that. A lot of matchups are actually really closer than you think. So I think it's important on this to say, oh my god, there's no way I could lose. Like, there's a chance that you could, because you don't draw well, or your opponent is really good with the deck that they're playing, or like whatever the situation is, like there's variance, and it's so much a part of the game, and knowing that is really important. So the fourth point is, I have a story time actually for you guys, is for life, or any small amount of life, does not mean that you're dead. So I think a lot of times people like have had instances where they like scooped prematurely, and like that is not something that I would say to do. I'm honestly a firm believer in, I don't scoop up my cards unless I know definitively that I am dead. Or that I am so close to death, like there's nothing I could draw or do that would legitimately stop my opponent. Story time. I was playing against Tron in GP Vegas, and you guys know that blue-white control has a weird matchup against Tron. It honestly just totally depends. I think the matchup has gotten better with like Field of Ruin, to be honest, and like that's one reason that I really prefer blue-white over Jeskai. I do really still like Jeskai. I have to film that video actually. Is like, now that I'm talking about it, I need to remember to film that. Talking about the differences between blue-white and Jeskai. Anyways, but so the blue-white matchup is kind of weird because you have a lot of land disruption, so you can like destroy their lands and then like, you know, cut them off of Tron, which is really good. Anyways, so I was playing against Tron, and like the matchup's kind of weird. I don't know the percentages or anything like that, but I was playing and it was game 1. And again, got me to like 4 life or something really low like that, and cast like Ulamog like 2 times. And so like a lot of times when you get Ulamog, even once, that's really detrimental for a lot of decks. They're like, boo, yeah, there's no way I can win against that. Okay, so here's the deal, is I legitimately could have scooped at that, and a lot of people would probably have been like, yeah, you should have. Okay, the thing is I didn't, because I had Path to Exile, and then the second Ulamog I like pathed. Ended up winning that game. I ended up like winning with like a Snapcaster Mage. I'm pretty sure I like pinged him to death with like that. So what I'm really getting at here is, do not scoop up your cards until you know for a fact that you're legitimately out of the game, because there have been instances where you can like totally crawl back for nothing. Another story, I was playing against Goblins. I was playing Grixis Control at the time. I was at 1 life for, I swear, like 15 turns, and I managed to crawl my way back out of that grave. I don't know, my plays were really tight that game, and I killed everything that he played, and like I was very, very lucky that game. But anyways, I will say, just don't scoop up your cards until you absolutely know for a fact that you're completely dead. I think this happens a lot recently with like KCI. I think a lot of people like don't know how KCI works, and they're like, and it's like, I feel like if you're playing against a really good KCI player, they should just be like, hey, I'm gonna do this infinite combo thing, is there any way you can respond? And your answer's probably gonna be no, and then you're like, cool, scoop up my cards. So yeah, anyways, okay, the 5th thing and the last thing that I will say is the idea that you think you won't see any sort of bruise or any sort of like lesser known decks. You think that you go into the mindset, okay, I'm just gonna see like the most popular deck, like Modern is like humans right now, like I'm gonna just face humans every single time. Okay, yeah, so you're very wrong. What I would say is to just really try to be prepared as you possibly can for a lot of those like lesser known decks, because honestly, I'm a firm believer that like you can get such an edge in the game regardless of how bad your matchup is, based on how well you know your deck. And a lot of people always talk about that, know your deck, know your deck, know your deck, but like honestly, it's really important to know your opponent's deck, especially with things like sideboard, because you could be playing something, and you know, one tip that I really like that I'm gonna say here, but I'll say it again in another sideboard video, is don't sideboard for their 60, sideboard for their 75. I think that's like such amazing advice. My friend Chris Brisky put it into words for me, and I was like, that's like perfect, I love that. And I just think like that is something that is so crucial to know, is like how to sideboard, and like those weirder cards or things like that you just may not see as frequently in like their sideboard, like things that they're gonna bring in. If you're playing against a lesser known deck, like I have lost so many matchups because like I just don't know how my opponent's deck is working, and I don't know what cards to bring in for sideboard. And on the same token, I don't know what cards they're gonna bring in for sideboard because I just don't know. And this is really tough as well with sideboard, because like your opponent could be playing a myriad of cards, like you just don't don't know. But honestly, just do your best and really, you know, get like a general idea. A lot of times those popular cards they're gonna like bring in against you, and just the more times you play against those lesser known decks, or just lesser known decks in general, you're gonna have a way better matchup against them, just because you're gonna feel more confident knowing those decks. So I think it's really important to, of course, you know, again, Modern, know humans, know that deck, know what cards they're running, but also pay attention to a deck like Goryo's Vengeance that like not everyone knows what, or KCI, like not a lot of people know what those decks do, and I think it's really important to like understand how those types of decks work, because you're gonna see them, and if you're just like a lost puppy, like totally confused, it is not a good place to be. Trust me, you will misplay, you will bring in wrong cards from your sideboard, and it is just not where you want to be. So yeah, I really hope this video was helpful, guys. I think I touched on some really key important details in this video that I really wanted to get out there. Yeah, that was pretty much all I have to say for now. I will see you guys in my next video. Bye.